Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Glad to have this man back, the founder and president of the Article 3 Project. It's Mike Davis. Mike, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
I want you to talk about the lunacy of trying or charging Rudy Giuliani with anything connected to RICO. I just think that's just a dumb... Mike, let me tell you something. This guy perfected the usage of that statute. It existed before him, but nobody used it right. He read Joe Bonanno's book and then took out the entirety of the 5 mob families in New York on a RICO case. Jack Smith, or not Jack Smith, this person, Fannie Willis in Georgia, is trying Rudy Giuliani on RICO or racketeering when of the 18 or 19 people charged, many of them don't know each other. How is that a RICO case? Help me out here.
It's not. This is lawless. This is election interference. This is lawfare by Democrats on many different fronts. As we've talked about, Joe, it started with Alvin Bragg's indictment of Trump for the non-felony of a businessman settling a nuisance claim. The Federal Election Commission, the prior Manhattan DA, the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan, and Alvin Bragg himself passed over on those charges because it was a nonsensical legal theory. It wasn't until Matthew Colangelo got sent from the Biden Justice Department to resurrect this zombie case to bring this unprecedented first indictment of a former president ever and a leading presidential candidate. And then Jack Smith charged President Trump for the non-crime of having his presidential records, which is allowed by the Presidential Records Act. That's why Congress gives former presidents the office of former president with secure office space, Secret Service protection, federally funded staff with security clearances. And then Jack Smith and this other Democrat DA, this Fannie Willis down in Fulton County, Georgia, are also charging Trump for the non-crime of objecting to a presidential election, which is allowed by the Electoral Count Act. 1887, twisting arms politically is allowed by the First Amendment. And then you see the New York Attorney General, Tish James, bringing civil fraud charges against Trump for the non-fraud of a businessman paying back sophisticated Wall Street banks in full with interest. We're hearing rumblings that we could get charges from Democrat prosecutors in either or both Arizona and Michigan. This is going to backfire on these Democrats. They're turning this into a joke. It's similar to what the Democrats did during the Kavanaugh confirmation. They didn't just stick to Christine Blasey Ford, who was lying through her teeth, but was the most credible. They brought in 5 other bogus allegations against Justice Kavanaugh, and it guaranteed that he was put on the Supreme Court for the rest of his life, and 4 Senate Democrat incumbents in 2018 got sent into early retirement when the Democrats won the House of Representatives. It should have been a great year. And so at the end of the day, the American people are going to decide these cases on November 5th, 2024.
Well, I agree with you, Mike, but see, here's the problem. And it's Mike Davis. He's the founder and president of the Article 3 Project. Go to article3project.org, go help out, go see what he does, and go follow him, MRDDMIA, over on Twitter and elsewhere. Mike, the problem is I grew up, I guess, very naive. I thought there were checks and balances. I thought the prosecutors could not do this and go rogue. It's not 1, it's not 2. It's going to end up being 5 or 6 different prosecutors. In Georgia alone, Mike, and again, I always thought we had this fair system where you couldn't have one that had more power than the other when it came to the branches. But as I look at what's happening in Georgia, she's literally charging not only the guy, but she's charging all of his lawyers. Mike, I'm confused because I thought you had the absolute right to get good legal representation, to mount a defense or to mount a support system around you, and then you had this thing called confidentiality between yourself and your legal team. How is she getting away with this in a system I thought had checks and balances?
Well, because you have these Democrat prosecutors and these Democrat judges and these Democrat juries and these Democrat hellholes like D.C., New York, and Atlanta, and they think that they're going to decide the election instead of the American people on November 5th, 2024. And you're seeing this in the polls already. This is backfiring. The first indictment helped Trump win the nomination. Jack Smith's indictment put Trump within close contention of Biden. Jack Smith's second indictment put Trump ahead of Biden. And I think that any subsequent indictment of Trump, like Trump said, he needs one more indictment to win this election. And I think that's what's going to happen here because, look, they're obviously coordinating. Fannie Willis down in Atlanta did a press conference after she announced this indictment, the most inappropriate press conference you can have as a prosecutor. And she was asked whether she was coordinating with Jack Smith and the Biden Justice Department, and she refused to answer the question. It's obvious that they're all coordinating. They waited 30 months until Trump left office to bring all of this lawfare on many different fronts, and now they're demanding to rush to have trials. After waiting 30 months, they're demanding to rush to have trials to interfere in the presidential election, and that's very obvious that that's what they're doing. And back to your comment about the racketeering statute, what is the alleged crime that they were agreeing to do here? It's not illegal to object to presidential elections. And so what is the alleged goal? What was the alleged illegal goal? To overturn the election? That's not illegal, right? That's through the political and legal process, and that's allowed. Otherwise, Democrats would be in jail for objecting and trying to overturn the election. And for Republican wins in 1968, 2000, 2004, and 2016. This is very political, and I think the American people are waking up to this.
Al Gore to this day thinks he won in 2000. It was 36 days before the American people found out who the next president was going to be. Nobody was thrown in jail. Nobody faced charges. Nobody was even questioned when the one side said I won, the other side said I won. One of those sides was wrong, Mike, and nobody faced any charges. The most incredible case to me is the one that Jack Smith has in Washington, D.C., where he claims Donald Trump knew he lost in 2020. Now, it's going to go into the mechanisms of his mind. He knew he lost, but even with that knowledge, he still tried to overturn it. Now, Mike, I don't know if you know Donald Trump. I do. The guy to this day thinks he won in 2020. Right now, when we hear him on Tucker tonight, he's going to say, I won in 2020. Jack Smith only can have a case if he's got some verifiable proof that Donald J. Trump knew he lost in 2020 and then lied by ginning up a bunch of trouble among the American people, claiming that he was ripped off. What do you think about that case? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
You're exactly right about that. Here's the problem. You have a Democrat prosecutor. You have this Democrat Obama judge, Tanya Chutkan, and you have a D.C. jury pool that voted 95% against Donald Trump, 95% Trump rage. What needs to happen for these January 6th cases, the one in D.C. and the one down in Fulton County, Georgia, is the president needs to file a motion to dismiss these indictments on two different legal fronts.
Okay.
Number one, presidential immunity. What he did on January 6th, he did it within his presidential powers or on the outer boundary, the outer perimeter of his presidential powers, and that's the Supreme Court case law.
Right.
Alternatively, if he doesn't have presidential immunity, if he's not acting as the president of the United States, which I don't know how he's not acting as the president of the United States, if your allegation is he's ordering his vice president to overturn the election, you can't do that as a private citizen. The only way you could do that as the is as the president of the United States. So alternatively, if he's doing it within his personal capacity as Donald J. Trump instead of President Trump, he can file a motion to dismiss on First Amendment grounds because there's no allegation here of any sort of threat, violence, extortion, force, anything that can make this illegal. The only way what President Trump did on January 6th, the only way it would be illegal is if he actually incited the riots, or if he was encouraging violence, or if he was threatening, if he was making inappropriate threats against prosecutors that he was going to, do something illegal to their family. That's the only way. Otherwise, this is clearly political speech, clearly redress of government, clearly political conduct that is absolutely protected by the First Amendment if it's in his personal capacity, or within presidential immunity if it's in his presidential capacity.
We literally, Mike, and it's Mike Davis, founder of the Article 3 Project, article3project.org. We literally have him saying, go peacefully, patriotically. We literally have him saying, leave the police alone. They're doing a hard job. We have him saying, just raise your voices, let them know what you want them to do. But when it comes to Mike Pence, he's lying about what Trump said to him. Pence said, Trump asked me to choose between him and the Constitution. That's a lie. What Trump said, and I've got this from Christina Bobb, one of Trump's lawyers, is, Mike, send those 4 envelopes back to the states that want them back. They want them back. They're not sure they sent the right electors or delegates. And Mike Pence said no, and he opened them, and then there was open debate about people challenging the delegates. Donald Trump has every right to say, hey, Mike, do me a favor. These 4 states want these electors back. Send them back. Let them deal with it on a state level. We shouldn't be dealing with this today. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're absolutely right, and that's what happened with Kennedy's election in 1960. So, I mean, it's the political process. Sometimes it's an ugly process. It's not pretty. Sometimes it's unseemly, but it is the political process. And if we're going to put politicians in prison for twisting arms, twisting political arms. Every politician in America, maybe besides Chuck Grassley, my former boss, who's the nicest guy in the world, but other than that, I think every politician in America is going to go to prison under this racketeering theory.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It's Mike Davis. Go to article3project.org. Mike, I've got to ask you, we're doing this today on Wednesday, the 23rd of August in 2023, for those who are watching it later. What's likely to happen tomorrow when the former president of the United States is going to go to Fulton County, where they gleefully are going to take a mugshot of him, and they're going to ask him for $200,000 bond? What's likely to happen tomorrow?
Well, I think what's going to happen tomorrow is the Democrats are going to gleefully, as you said, put out that mugshot. And I think it's going to offend the American people. It's going to make it very real to the American people that we've become a third world Marxist hellhole banana republic. And we have these Democrat prosecutors in these Democrat hellholes like New York, D.C., and Atlanta who are arrogant enough to think that they get to decide the next presidential election instead of real Americans and real America.
Does he come out stronger because of this?
I think he will. If you look at the polling, again, every time they indict him, it just cheapens the first indictment. They should have just stuck to Jack Smith's Mar-a-Lago raid indictment for the presidential records.
Right.
It's clearly going to win ultimately on the Presidential Records Act versus the Espionage Act, but that was their most plausible case. But they couldn't do that. They had to bring in Alvin Bragg, and they had to bring in Jack Smith's other January 6th indictment, and then you had to bring in, Tish James up in New York, and the Fulton County DA. I mean, it just never stops. Again, it was
right.
The Kavanaugh confirmation. They couldn't just stick to Christine Blasey Ford and beat him. They brought in 5 others and ended up losing 4 Senate Democrat incumbents. And Kavanaugh's on the Supreme Court for the rest of his life. And guess what? He overturned Roe versus Wade. So, put that in your pipe.
Yeah, no, exactly right. It's Mike Davis. Go follow him everywhere. Go to the article3project.org. A couple of last quick questions, Mike. Number one, I had Alan Dershowitz on Monday. He said the worst case for Trump, and he says it's not even as big. It's not like even a cigar. It's a small cigarette butt of a case. He kept on making that reference, which was weird. But he said the only case they really have is Jack Smith has this audio tape of Donald Trump allegedly showing something he didn't declassify to a reporter, saying, I probably should have declassified this, but I didn't need to declassify it. My retort to that was, well, he could have been lying. It could have been a piece of blank paper. We don't know what he was showing to the reporter. But is that your belief as well, that that's the only meat to any case here, that Trump may have said, I have something I know that I didn't declassify and I'm showing it to you?
It doesn't matter whether he declassifies things or not. These are his presidential records. He's allowed to have his presidential records. He's allowed to show people he designates his presidential records. And like you said, there's no evidence that it was. How do we know it wasn't just Trump blustering like Trump does, right? Where's the document? Where's the document that he actually showed to the reporter? And then did he wave it in the air? Did he actually give it to her and let her see it and actually read it? I mean, that's the difference. And there's no evidence that he put it in front of her, let her see her, let her see it, let her read it. And even if he did, remember, we're dealing with the Presidential Records Act, not the Espionage Act.
And if you look at the top drawer of Bill Clinton in his sock drawer, he had stuff that we know that he didn't openly declassify. And this was his side, I believe, of conversations with world leaders that he allegedly wasn't allowed to have until the judge and jury, or the judges said, no, he can have that presidential record stuff. It's Mike Davis. Go follow him, MRDDMIA, over on social media. One last question. You alluded to this a second ago, but give me about a minute on this if you don't mind. Are you telling me that we have people in different states lined up and ready to go when all 4 of these indictments fail, that they're going to start indicting as well? They're just going to keep on doing this until the election?
It sounds like it. We're hearing rumblings that this attorney general out in Arizona, who barely won the election and only won the election because the Democrats cheated. They had the wrong size ballots for people who came in on voting day. People signed overwhelmingly Republican voters who showed up on election day. They checked in. Their ballots wouldn't get sent through the readers because they were the wrong size, and they got sent to a different voting location where they had to wait again. And many of these people were disenfranchised. The Democrats opposed a 3-hour extension, and this Democrat judge in Arizona would not give a 3-hour extension. So those people who lined up and waited because of this failure in Maricopa County, they couldn't vote. So you have this Arizona attorney general who was not even legitimately elected. Barely, the vote tally was ahead by 250 votes. Clearly would not have won if they actually had a fair election in Maricopa County that day.
Right.
This attorney general apparently is looking at charging Trump for another January 6th theory. I mean,
Wow.
maybe Michigan, another Democrat attorney general up there.
But Dana Nessel will indict a ham sandwich. We know that Dana Nessel will do that. She tried to arrest reporters, Mike, who are reporting the truth about science and COVID. So yeah, I wouldn't doubt that's happening. So she's in line too?
It sounds like it, but again, once they file the motion to dismiss on the presidential immunity, unlike the First Amendment, that has to go through the trial process and the appeals. The presidential immunity is immediately appealable, and that is an issue that you can get up to the Supreme Courts potentially. They don't have to take the case, but if they remove this case to the Northern District of Georgia to federal court, they file this motion to dismiss for presidential immunity or alternatively First Amendment. If that motion for presidential immunity is denied, it is immediately appealable to the 11th Circuit, and if they deny it, the Supreme Court could take that case. That is the way you can get the Supreme Court to take these January 6 cases with Jack Smith, with Fani Willis, maybe with Michigan, maybe with Arizona, and get those resolved immediately so they're not interfering in the next election.
Always amazing information. Mike Davis, founder, president, Article 3 Project, article3project.org. Follow him, MRDDMIA, over on social media. Mike, I appreciate you jumping in today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, brother. We're back after this. Stay right here.